then when I relapsed and I kind of went on a run and I woke up and it was my birthday and I was like grieving my clean time like I was grieving somebody I loved. I was devastated. I was devastated. That's the best way to put it, you know?
So that's Nicole Obrigavitch. She's also goes by Not Anonymous Nick on Instagram. If you want to check her out there, she's quite popular. So this is the first attempt at a new kind of format for the show. We jump right into recovery instead of telling all the old war stories. Well, Nicole has a hell of a story. I got to say, I'm really happy that we're moving in that direction. Hey, if you're enjoying our content, if you could just please go ahead, hit that like, comment, share, do all those things, subscribe, depending on what platform you're on. There is no better way to support what we're doing here and spreading the message. I really do appreciate every single interaction. The title sponsor for today's episode is AARC. That's the Alberta Adolescent Recovery Center. They are in Alberta. They are a recovery center for adolescents and their whole family. The whole family takes part in this. It's a peer system that they work with. Absolutely amazing. You can learn more at their website, of course, at arc.ab.ca. That's ARC with 2 A's. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Watchers, listeners, supporters of all kinds. Welcome to another episode of the Ashes to Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Chuck LaFlange, checking in from Krabi, Thailand. Of course, my guest is in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Nicole Obrigavitch. Did I get it right? Obrigavitch?
No.
Not even close? Not even close?
You did last time. It's Obrigavitch.
Obrigavitch, sorry. Jeez, eh? Stop yelling at me.
It was close.
Stop
It was
yelling
so close. So close.
How you doing today, Nicole?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I think if I got somebody's name right, it would be weird to the audience at this point because I get them all wrong all the time. So I feel like maybe I do that on purpose. That's what's happening. I do it on purpose. So yeah.
My name's a tough one though. So yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, hey, we were talking pre-record, and hey, let's just be cards on the table. We tried to record last week. It didn't work out. We did the whole testimony thing for half an hour. The show's trying to get away from that. Let's just start talking about recovery and stuff. So what's going on in your world? Why are you, let's start with where your recovery began and kind of move forward from there and get to the good stuff right away. How's that sound? Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
So often people will ask how you came into recovery. And for me, it actually started with an arrest. A final arrest for trafficking and proceeds of crime. I mean, obviously, there were a lot of things that happened before I finally came into recovery, because that particular arrest that I'm talking about happened when I was 45 years old. And at that point, I had been in varying degrees of active addiction since I was 12 years old.
Similar
so
to me.
Previous to and I consider that to be the pivotal moment for me. Previous to that, I had made other attempts to come into recovery, but those were more forced. For example, I lost my career as a lawyer, and that was also somewhat pivotal, but I had some other things going on that it wasn't the optimum time for me to come into recovery yet. I wasn't quite low bottom enough yet at that point. I tried to go to detox then. I saw an addictions doctor. I kind of did some counseling. I went to a few meetings, but I wasn't ready yet. And then I had my kids taken away from me, and you would think that maybe that would be it.
No, I
that
would
also
not. No,
was not it. And and maybe you've seen this before, but I think that that piece is really difficult for women, because when we admit as women that we had our children taken away, there's a lot of stigma and judgment attached to that.
Yeah.
And people say ignorant things like, "Oh, you love drugs more than you love your kids," or there's a lot, and so that wasn't it either.
And of course, you have a coping mechanism built in for things that you don't want to feel, right? Which just makes it so much harder, right? When somebody loses their kids, right? So yeah,
absolutely. So that wasn't it either. I had to go through a lot of really, really terrible situations, and another approximately 5 years of raging active addiction, and I had to be stopped. That was
Yeah.
it. So the prison sentence,
Yeah.
that's what stopped me.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting, as I think my story isn't that far off from yours, Nicole, really. Wasn't until I was 45 that I finally said, okay, enough's enough. So very similar in that way, right? I started a bit later than you, but very, very similar, right? The times that I did attempt it, like I think I went through detox 3 times, 2, maybe 3 times. But every time I did that, it wasn't, yes, I went back and relapsed, but it wasn't that I lost that either. You know what I mean? Like that, the things that I learned, it's like an accumulative effect, if you will.
Yep.
You know what I mean, right? So, for a good example, and I don't know if you experience this or not, the feelings wheel or the emotional lexicon. Do you know what I'm talking about? Did you ever have to do that in treatment or
No?
no? It's a
No, I did not.
wheel
No.
that's got all the different feelings, and it talks about root feelings and why you feel the way you feel. But I still remember that being one of the very first things that I learned in detox, because that's where I kind of got into the lesson cycle, that they do there. And to this day, I still think about, had I really hung on to that, I might have just done a little bit better, because it was just so important, the things that I learned in that. I've actually done a whole 3-part series on emotional lexicon with my therapist buddy, just kind of diving into that, right? But some interesting stuff there for sure. Why do you feel the way you feel, right? Anger is never really anger. It's caused by fear or, whatever, right? So, all that to say that the accumulative effect of all those attempts at recovery really does matter, I think, in my mind. I don't know if it's the same experience for you or not, but
no, absolutely. And like I said, recovery didn't actually start for me until that arrest, and those previous attempts, as far as I'm concerned, that cumulative effect that you're talking about, that had nothing to do with that. I was still, before that arrest, using very toxic coping skills. And I think until, while I was incarcerated, and I know that this is very cliche, and people often will roll their eyes when they hear this, but this was the first time that I had an actual relationship with my higher power.
Hey, just a quick interruption before we get too far into the episode. The special sponsor for today's episode is the Yatra Trauma Center here in Krabi, Thailand, where I reside. If you're new to the platform, you might not know that's how I started my healing journey here in Thailand. I was fortunate enough to experience their 30-day residential treatment program. They believe that where addiction is a smoke, trauma is the fire. And what they did for me was absolutely life-changing. I will scream their praises from the rooftops to the day I die. If you want to learn more about them and see Mike, the head clinician, in some episodes, you can go to a2apodcast.com/trauma. And of course, you can get their contact info there as well, and all that jazz. So thanks for listening. Back to the show. Okay.
When I was institutionalized, like I had been living my whole entire life with this spiritual vacuum and this hole that, was somewhat, I think, associated to some mental health issues around anxiety and, the way that I had been parented as a child, and some of the things that had happened for me while I was growing up. I had that hole, and people say this all the time when they're talking about using alcohol or drugs, is your sex or whatever you're trying to fill it with, is that you were trying to fill that hole. And I always was carrying that, and I carried it my whole entire life. And I think I was incarcerated. And by the way, I was really very fortunate, because I got a federal sentence, and got it in Saskatchewan. And I thought I was headed to Edmonton Institute for Women, which is a super max. It's got, those sorts of programs. They do have a little bit of cultural programming, but not like Okama Ochi Healing Lodge. And that's actually where I got to serve my federal sentence. And so, despite the fact that I'm a settler and I'm non-Indigenous, I grew up with a grandparent that was very connected to the land and to the people that lived close to the ranch where I grew up. And so I was exposed to that while I was growing up to a degree with my grandfather. And so it was really weird because when I got out at the healing lodge of the vehicle, and by the way, I didn't even know that's where I was going. I thought I was going to Edmonton Max, which,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
I wasn't really looking forward to that at all.
No.
You know, you know, I think that, it probably would have been a lot worse for me because I am non-Indigenous and because I don't come from a street lifestyle. And when I ended up in the women's correctional waiting to go to the feds, and I had been in there a couple of times, you know, people would always say that, you know, women that I was serving time with would say, oh, is she from the streets? And the other ones would say, no, she's not from the streets at all. And I think I was a little bit lucky because of the people that I was kind of associated with, kind of, you know, looked after my ass. Otherwise, I probably would have went through some really scary situations. So I thought I was going to Edmonton Max. You know, I kind of didn't really feel any type of way about it because I didn't really know what it was going to look like. And the morning that I was getting shipped out from Pine Grove, I found out I was going to OOHL, which is the Healing Lodge. And
Yeah.
I remember getting out of the vehicle with two guards, and I just looked around and I was like, the first thing that occurred to me was it reminded me of my grandpa's ranch. Birch trees everywhere, you know, it was not like a prison at all. So when I tell people I've been in prison, it's kind of funny because this is on Neckinique Reserve. There's no fences. There is
Yeah,
no
you always have
like
to qualify it
cells.
at this point,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So, you know, basically
Yeah.
you're living out in the middle of nowhere in Maple Creek on Neckinique Reserve, and you are afforded so much opportunity around culture and you know, just kind of looking at your crime and being supported through that. And so when I got there, first thing I thought was, this is a lot like my grandpa's ranch, and I feel like I'm home. And the second thing I thought was, I'm going to utilize this as an opportunity to get treatment. And that's
Yeah.
what I looked at it as. Not formal treatment, like going to rehab or whatever, but I just knew that the connection to the land and the connection to how I grew up and everything, and that opportunity was there for me.
Yeah.
And very soon after I got there, I got to meet, you know, the elders that worked out of the lodge. And one of them said to me, and I think this was the most pivotal moment for me when I did decide that, you know, I was done, that I wasn't going to live that way anymore. She said to me, you are carrying so much shame. She said, the first thing I could see when I met you was that you have an immense amount of shame. And if you don't figure out a way to let that go, you will end up exactly where you were before you came into here.
Wow. Okay. Okay,
So,
I want to pause that. I want to pause right there for
yeah.
you. How'd that feel, that moment? When somebody, I just
Well,
remember the first time an empath, like a real empath, said something like that to me, and it was just this wash of, oh, you are an amazing, like, yeah. So I want to know how that made you feel in that moment.
in the moment, and this is going to sound really weird, but in the moment, it actually made me feel more ashamed. It
Okay.
made me just that acknowledgement. It took me, let me just put it this way. It took me a couple of days to kind of process that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Because I had spent my whole life trying to be this really tough person, you know, because I always considered vulnerability to be a weakness, and letting people in and acknowledging that you were hurt, or acknowledging that you you know, were ashamed, or acknowledging that there was something wrong with you
Yeah.
was basically how I got myself into a lot of situations, like self-protective, always trying to protect myself, always trying to protect my emotions, always trying to control my emotions, and therefore being very, very toxic and carrying that shame deep, deep, deep inside. because
Yeah.
that was also how I was brought up as a child. You,
Yes.
this is how you manage your emotions. You shove them down and you stand
Absolutely.
up and you soldier on, and you
Yep.
don't acknowledge that you're hurt. You don't
Yep.
talk about those feelings.
Yeah.
You just, you push through. And
Mhm.
and I recognize now, and during my time at OHL, that was something that became really clear to me, was that I needed to have some humility around not only how I protected myself, but how that the consequences for other people that I cared about, that I did allow into my bubble, and how those behaviors came out in very toxic ways.
Yes. 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 Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
Continue though. That was, yeah. I wanted to jump on that.
Yeah, that's okay. So basically, I think that for the next 2 weeks, and this was just like in my first month that I was there, so we addressed shame. Got to think about that for a couple of days, and I was like, I have to learn how to forgive myself. I need to learn how to forgive people from my past that I think that have hurt me. And then I started to look at, vulnerability and that sort of thing. And then I started to look at humility, and that was also huge for me, because I never did anything wrong as far as I was concerned. Everything I did was, because I grew up with this really great sense of integrity and morals, because despite the fact that I wasn't taught really great, emotional intelligence by the people that loved me while I was growing up. I was taught right and wrong, and I was taught about community, and I was taught about being true to your word and follow through and all of those things. But, as somebody that was in active addiction, and we can all speak to this, is all of those things that you hold important, previous, full-blown addiction, I'll never do this, I never do that, and you
Oh
do
yeah.
all of those
You work your way
things,
through the
all of
list,
those
right?
things.
Absolutely, you do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the
Yep.
shame piece, I think the biggest shame piece for me was, first of all, what happened with my children.
Yep.
I was actually brought up by my great grandparents. My mom had me when she was 18 years old, and her and my dad had a very, very toxic relationship. Lots of substance abuse. My dad actually died in active addiction. Still a lot of drinking, in my family. And I spent a lot of the time growing up saying, oh, I would never do what my mom did. I would never leave my kids, and I carried a lot of resentment for my mom, and things that happened when I was a child. And despite the fact that my great grandparents were absolutely amazing parents to me, and I was given such a great opportunity to grow up with, I was born with 12 grandparents, like
Holy
great
shit.
grandparents, great grandparents. And so
Grandparents in there too, I'm
yeah,
sure. When you get to
no,
12, there's some. No, that was 12
no,
biological
no.
grandparents.
So
Oh my lord.
grandparents, great
Yeah.
great grandparents, or
Oh wow.
great
Okay.
grandparents, and great great grandparents.
Young
So
mother. So yeah, I get that. That makes sense. Yeah, you
yeah,
said at 18.
yeah,
So okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's
yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
But young mothers before that. So like I
Yeah.
was surrounded by love, but there were conditions to that love. Like, you had to be tough. We don't really talk about those things. We love you, but you gotta be strong. Great
Yeah.
work ethic, really good integrity, but those emotions,
Yeah.
emotional intelligent piece wasn't there. But anyways, point was
Yeah.
is that I had a lot of resentment towards my mom,
Okay.
and I was like, I would never do that, but I ended up doing that and more,
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
even things that were really far worse than all of that. So I'm sort of coming to all of these realizations while I'm in the institution, and then I also start building this relationship with a higher power. And to me, I'd gone to a few AA meetings and NA meetings when I was first dabbling with recovery, like I said, when
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
was losing my legal career, when I was losing my kids. But that was like forced treatment in a way, and
Mhm.
so I finally started thinking about my position in the universe and whether there was something bigger than me and whether I could trust that things would turn out the way that they were supposed to turn out. And through being incarcerated at the Healing Lodge and my relationship with the elders there, I started looking at, my higher power as creator, which is something that is in indigenous spirituality, and it really resonated with me. Despite the fact that I'm a white woman and I'm a settler, I just really love the idea of connection in the universe and how everything's connected. The way that we associate or connect to the land, and the way that we connect with our relatives and nature and the animals and everything. And it's really more about the seven sacred teachings and just being a good person. And I didn't get a deep understanding of it, obviously. I was only there for 9 months. But what I did take away from that was really important to my recovery moving on.
Okay.
One thing that I did also get to do while I was there was I got to go to treatment in Calgary, and that was a 6-week treatment program, and that's where I did start learning about some of the things that you were talking about, but not exactly the same as what you were talking about. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. So I mean, I'll go back a little bit. Yeah. Finding out, like, thinking, okay, I'm going to Max. I'm going to this on reserve rural camp kind of style or ranch style, right? I can only imagine the sense of like, bitches, like, it's just like how much relief there must have been with that, especially like when you got out of the van, especially. I mean, there had to have been. I mean, I'm going to
explain something. Yeah, I'm going to explain something to you. I think that there's this idea that it's easy time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't easy time.
No, I've done a camp. I've done a prison camp. I totally understand that. But
and what contrast, I mean by that was, what I mean though is when you go to Edmonton Max, or when you go to an institution that's all about just keeping your head down and doing your time, and getting through, I think that it's far different than doing that tough emotional work. And doing that tough work about, looking about your past and looking about how you got there and making a real commitment to change. Because, a lot of women aren't given that opportunity, and they go to federal institutions and they aren't supported the way they need to be supported in respect to their addictions and their mental health. And just that, you're in there basically trying to survive. And there's a lot of really not great things that happen in Max institutions, and not only just the oppressive nature of the institution itself, and some of the issues around the treatment of women that are in those institutions by guards, and just the rules and the policies and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of freaking lateral violence in those institutions.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
And, despite the fact that I didn't really have to go through that in Edmonton Max, I definitely did go through some of those things in Pine Grove, which is the women's correctional in Saskatchewan.
So I guess what I was referring to is just that when you discover that I'm gonna go to this open air place instead of this. I mean, there must have been a feeling of relief there, like of like, wow, relief. No, like this is before you realize, it's just in that moment. You know what I mean? Like,
like I said, I don't think it wasn't relief so much. Like I said, I looked at it as an opportunity.
Fair enough.
And that was literally like it one of my first thoughts. This is an opportunity.
Okay.
And by the way, there's a relapse after this. So despite the fact that I had those opportunities to connect with my creator and connect with myself emotionally and to do that hard work, and when I was in there, I also was introduced to AA and NA and started kind of working a program, and was able to reestablished relationships with all three of my children and other really important people that have been in my life since I was a teenager, and, work on all of those pieces, and also go to treatment. I think that, it, there was still a lot of work that had to be done that couldn't necessarily happen in that sort of really protected little place.
Of course. Yeah.
So
yeah. So 9 months, you said you did there? 9 months?
okay. Yeah. So I got a 3.5-year sentence. And federal sentences are much better than provincial sentences, because at 25% of your sentence, you are eligible for parole. And since this was my first real conviction, like, I had some pissy stuff from before, but nothing that was taking me to the feds. And basically, I like I said, I went to treatment in Calgary, and then when I came back, I went up for parole, and I got day parole at 9.5 months. Wow. And I was released to Kamloops. I decided when I was looking at my release plan that I didn't want to come back to Saskatoon, because a lot of really not great things happened in Saskatoon. I still had a connection to a previous relationship that I was in for 3.5 years that was very, very toxic. And I just didn't feel like I was strong enough to return to community. And I had, a lot of really terrible things happened to me when I was running the streets in Saskatoon, and my kids were in Burnet. So I chose Kamloops. I didn't know one person in Kamloops.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be a good fit for me. So I was released to Kamloops.
And
And
I see a look there.
Yeah. So so I got released, and I started doing the things that you're supposed to do. Like, I got a home group, and I got a sponsor, and I was going to meetings, and I was doing some volunteering in community. I was volunteering at 2 different places, at Salvation Army, and then I was also volunteering at the Elizabeth Fry Society in Kamloops. And but I still was carrying that shame a little bit. I took a couple months to try to figure out what things would look like for me, because despite the fact that I had 2 university degrees, and despite the fact that I was a lawyer for almost 8 years, I wasn't really sure what life was going to look like. And I didn't want to be transparent about the fact that I had just been released from prison. And I didn't want to be transparent about the fact that I had this, somewhat expansive criminal record. And I didn't want to be transparent about the fact that I was in active addiction for years. And that's why I lost my career. And that's why I didn't have my children. And so I felt like I was kind of in this spot where I was in when I was a lawyer, and I wasn't able to really talk about the fact that I was in an abusive marriage, and I wasn't really able to talk about the fact that I was in raging active addiction, and I wasn't really able to show weakness or vulnerability, and like I was talking about.
Same
so
thing,
you're
just
hiding
different.
you're hiding in plain sight. And so now I'm in this situation again where I'm trying to follow all my parole conditions, and I'm trying to find a job, and I'm trying to figure out where I'm fitting in community, and I'm hiding in plain sight again. I applied for a bunch of jobs, and no one was calling me back. I had this 8-year gap in my employment history, and people would say things like, "Oh, you're a lawyer. Why are you applying for a job in a clothing store?" Or you were a lawyer. Why are you applying for a job at a furniture store? Like,
I can totally relate to that. And it's, now you want to lie on the resume for that gap, because it's like, but lying isn't being authentic, and it's a horrible place to be. Yeah.
And there's lies by omission, right? And despite the fact I'm working a program, and honesty is a big piece of that, and I wasn't there yet, right?
Yeah.
And I was still carrying that shame, and I was doing some step work, but I wasn't being thorough, and I wasn't putting my all into it, and I wasn't going to too many meetings. I was going to enough meetings that I was kind of picking up the program. But I got a job at a clothing store selling clothing, but I lied, and I got a job at a furniture store with someone who I'm actually really good friends with to this day. And I was able to be authentic with her, but I still was working for $10 an hour,
Yeah.
and it wasn't ideal because I knew that I had a purpose, and that I wasn't meeting that purpose, and so I started slipping back into old behaviors.
Hmm.
Like, for example, I stopped really going to meetings. I kind of dropped my step work. I wasn't really doing my step work. I started a relationship, online relationship with somebody from the States that I met on a recovery site, but we trauma bonded over all of the really bad things. We had both just been released from prison. We both, had issues in our past with partners, and we both, a bunch of things that we both did that we didn't want to carry on into
Yeah.
any sort of future relationship. But that was
Yeah.
kind of what it was based in. And I found myself um slipping into old behaviors in respect to how I engage in a relationship, with like an intimate relationship. And there was like a lot of toxic shit going on, and it was almost identical
Yeah.
to my previous two relationships when I was in screaming raging active addiction,
Yeah.
except for I was not using.
Yeah.
um so basically I was existing. I was working two jobs, one for $10 an hour, one at minimum wage. And in this relationship that was not healthy for me at all. And I made this really great plan. You're gonna think I'm an idiot.
Probably
But I'm
not,
going to
but
tell you
anything's possible.
anyways
Yeah.
because
Okay. Yeah.
it's part of my story. It's part of my story. But so I made this really great plan that as soon as I was off parole, and by the way, parole is probably what kept me clean.
Yeah.
Because I was engaging in all these old behaviors again, and the fact that I was on parole is what kept me clean. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And my parole officer thought I was doing great, but that's
Yeah.
because I was following my parole conditions to a T, except for the relationship part. But I didn't have to report the relationship because he was in the States and I was
Yeah.
in Canada, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So,
no word of a lie, that like the second day I was off parole,
mhm.
I sold everything I owned, and I quit both of my jobs, and I gave up my apartment, and I got my passport, and I went across the border down to the States.
Oh no.
And within
Eh, no.
less than a month, I was selling drugs and using drugs and engaged
Wow.
in the exact same relationship that I had been in with my partner before I got
Ah.
arrested, and my
Yeah.
husband. And this was down in the States, and
Yeah.
like in psychosis, because the drugs down there, no joke. And everyone had guns, and like
Oh
it
yeah.
it was
Totally different
nuts.
world. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was nuts. And so I was down there for about 6 weeks, and I came back to Canada because I knew, like, when I relapsed down there, I was like I felt like I was at that point. I had 33 months clean,
Yeah.
and when I can remember the exact point where I used, because I was down there for almost a month before I used, and he was, when I got there. And by the way, slipping into old behaviors and choosing to see what I wanted to see, and the
Yeah.
self will was so huge in all of that. And
Hmm.
you know, when I got down there, it was clear that he was dealing. Like, not an idiot. Like, why did I
Yeah.
not see that before I went down?
Well, I
I
mean,
probably
that's
should have. Yeah.
understandable. I mean,
Yeah.
virtual is, totally
Right.
pretty
Right.
easy to hide behaviors when it's about, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm not
I
an
know.
idiot. I chose not to see that.
Fair
And
enough. Yeah.
I can remember one of the first things I thought when I got down there, I was like, what the hell is this guy doing? He's got a half game and he owes $200. What a joke. And so like within weeks, I'm like, this is how you do it. And like it was so stupid. And so yeah, right. And then when I relapsed and I kind of went on a run and I woke up and it was my birthday and I was like grieving my clean time like I was grieving somebody I loved.
Oh,
And yeah, like I was devastated. I was
yeah.
devastated. That's
No
the best
kidding.
way to put it,
I've never heard
and
somebody say that before, Nicole. That's interesting. It totally makes sense now that you've said it out loud. It makes perfect sense.
yeah.
Grieving your clean time, but I've never heard somebody use that phrase before. So, yeah, continue.
Yeah, and it was terrible. I stayed in bed. I stayed in
Yeah.
bed for like probably about 10 days. And I in that very short period of time, I think it was only like 3 weeks or something like that I was back out using. I lost 25 pounds. My face was all picked up again. I had already alienated a bunch of people back in Canada.
As I say,
just
we don't just start again.
oh
We make up for lost time.
no,
Right?
yeah,
We get
and I
yeah, right.
yeah, and that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that was the first time also that I really understood the whole idea of what a progressive illness addiction is. Like I was
Yeah.
like progressive, yeah. Like it was so extreme so quickly, and so I effed around a little bit more down there for another couple weeks, and then I was like, okay, I got to go back to Canada. There's like no way that I can continue to live like this, and I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't like I got back to Canada and it was all great. It wasn't like
Yeah.
that. It was like I went back down again and I tried
Oh.
again. And then that was it. I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. And I came back to Canada again and I got a hold of a woman that I knew from the rooms in Kamloops.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I need to make some changes and I need to be serious about this. And by the way, like I had given everything up, like my apartment, my jobs, and I
Yeah,
had
right.
no money at all.
Yeah.
And I'm living at my mom's and in Brandon, Manitoba.
Oh,
And
wow. So you skipped over
yeah.
now 2 provinces. Oh my. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
because I went from Kamloops to Brandon before I went down to the States, right?
Okay.
And that's
Yeah.
how I drove across. My mom, she's so helpful. She drove me across, not only once, but twice. And it was so funny because I'm not supposed to be down there. And they're like, come on in. So,
Yeah.
whatever. It is what it is. I think that Creator gave me that opportunity to learn and take things more seriously.
Oh yeah, that never even
So-
occurred to me. You're fresh off parole and you're jumping across the border, right? Yeah.
Right,
That never even occurred.
right,
Jeez.
right,
It's been
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Continue.
Good thing, yeah. So I didn't have hardly any tattoos at that point. So I looked like a little nice church lady going
Yeah.
across the border. So they're like, come on in. So anyways, so I reach out to this woman I know that has I think she at that point had about 10 years of clean time. And I was like, I need help. Like I need somebody who's serious about this to give me a hand. And she said, come back to Kamloops and I will help
Yep.
you. And so again, with absolutely nothing and no money and none of that, I got a hold of the woman that I used to work at her furniture store and I'm like, I need help. And she said, you can come and live in my basement and I will help you any way I can and let's get you cleaned up. So I took a bus back to Kamloops and that's when things changed for me. And yeah.
Wow. Jeez, eh?
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that lady at the furniture store, no doubt.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
No kidding, eh?
Yeah.
Without some graciousness from other people, where would we be, right? Some grace from other people, I should say. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So That's now you've been clean since then. How long ago was that?
That is September 27th, 2018 is the day I got on the bus. And
Okay.
yeah,
So we're
I
coming up on
actually
6 years then, eh? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And
Phew.
I got on the bus in Manitoba, in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I actually went from Brandon to Winnipeg to visit a friend of mine who has since passed because
Oh,
of
I'm
her
sorry.
addiction.
Yeah.
So many people, though, you know, I'm sure you
Right.
know just as many people as I have.
Mm.
And
I talk sometimes about how it's been just over 19 months for me now, way more than
yeah.
19 people.
Oh,
That's the new reality,
absolutely.
right? Because of
Yeah.
course, when I left, fentanyl had just become mainstream, so
Right.
it was like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
everybody,
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's one piece that I do want to talk about because I think has been the absolute most important piece for me. And you kind of touched on this a little bit about it being cumulative and taking the things that you learned along the way and despite relapsing, you're not starting at ground zero, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what got me up out of the bed and going again, despite the fact that I continue to use a little bit for the next couple of months. But that was the thing in the back of my head, like, I'm feeling shame. I need to forgive myself so I don't do this anymore. I need to get supports, and I need to be able to surrender. And
Did you go back to the same home group in Kamloops?
I did not. I did not go
Okay.
back to the same home group because, and this is not, listen, I'm not using this as an excuse or justification, but when I was attending meetings before my relapse, my sponsor, that relationship was also a little bit toxic, and she went back out before I left Kamloops.
Oh,
And she
dear.
actually drove me to the airplane loaded when I left Kamloops.
Wow. So obviously not the place that,
No.
No.
So that experience did not color how I felt about Narcotics Anonymous. That wasn't it at all. I think it was just sort of part of the whole dumpster fire that was. And so when I got back to Kamloops, I started going to the home group that my new sponsor went to.
Yeah.
And basically before my relapse, because I only made it to step 3, and because I only had some ideas about what the program was really about, I didn't really understand surrender. And I didn't really understand that connection with my higher power and why it was important. The fact that I did have a relationship with my creator filled that spiritual vacuum to a large degree. And despite the fact that I relapsed and I went back out, that was based more on my ability to cope and my poor emotion management. And that's something that, you know, has been common for me my whole entire life. You know, sad, you get loaded; mad, you get loaded; happy, you get loaded. You just get loaded, right? And
of course.
And so when I went down to the States and found out that he was using and dealing, that's how I dealt with it. You know, I was like, this motherfucker, watch this. And he was sorry, believe me when I tell you that. But I'm a nightmare. I am a nightmare. Like, I really am a nightmare. Terrible.
Sure showed him. Yeah.
Yeah, right? No, exactly. And so when I got back to Kamloops and started doing my step work and really understood what surrender meant, I think that is absolutely was what the life changer was for me.
Okay.
Because surrender is something that I do in the morning and about 20 times through the day. And you know, we talked about this already, but that whole vulnerability piece and trying to protect yourself and being a hard person and control, you know, that was what fed all of the toxic shit in my life. It fed the toxic shit in my relationships. It fed my addiction. It fed, you know, everything in my life that I couldn't control, basically was how negative things would happen for me. And
Fair
so
enough.
when I figured out that whole piece that I didn't need to control things, and that in fact I shouldn't be controlling things, and that I could hand it over and just let things naturally occur and roll out the way that they're supposed to, and have faith in
Yeah.
my creator and something bigger than me, revealing things to me and, showing me a different path. That
Hmm.
was when things changed for me
Okay.
100%.
Okay. And that's 6 years ago. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So what are you
Yeah.
doing these days? Well, I know what you're doing
And
these
this is
days, but
part of it.
yes,
Yes.
yes, yes,
Yes. And
yes.
this is absolutely part of it. So, prior to the relapse, prior to me going down the States and coming back to Kamloops, I had been doing some volunteering with the Elizabeth Fry Society of Kamloops. And most people probably don't even know what the Elizabeth Fry Society
I have a
is.
basic understanding, but why don't you tell us what
Yeah.
Elizabeth Fry is?
Okay,
So
so
yeah.
there are actually 22 Elizabeth Fry societies across Canada, and they all kind of do different things, but primarily what they do is they monitor conditions of confinement for women that have involvement with the criminal justice system.
Okay.
And the one in Kamloops, they provide a lot of housing, and especially housing for women that are leaving intimate partner violence situations.
Okay.
Don't do a lot of work with criminalized women. Don't do a lot of work with Indigenous women. And although I did end up working for them when I came off my relapse for 4 years, and I became the housing manager for their affordable housing portfolio, there was a point where I decided that that's not really what I wanted to be doing, because I was also doing some frontline with an organization. It's a harm reduction organization that basically supports people from streets to home. So whether you're in active addiction, it's housing first. Like they bring you in and give you, make sure that your basic needs are looked after, so that you can look after your addiction or look after your mental health or whatever. And if you choose to remain using, that's cool too. Just making sure that people are being cared for properly. So I'm working for Elizabeth Fry in Kamloops, and over that 4 years was working for Elizabeth Fry, I was in contact with a friend of mine from Saskatchewan named Chantal Huel, who
Chantal.
had, yes, we love Chantal. And,
yes, we do. Yeah. Trap House
we
Testimonies,
had,
folks, if you're wondering who that is. So yeah.
yes.
Anybody who's been
And
on part
so
of my
much
platform
more.
is more than aware of Chantal, and
Yeah, and
she's a big part of
so
my
much
world.
more.
So
She's an
yeah.
amazing community support. And so Chantal and I had been in touch basically over social media, and we met while I was in OOHL, and she at the time actually came in with Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan. She had been employed with them at the time.
Okay.
And that's how I met her. And we knew a lot of the same people because Saskatchewan is small. And
It's a village of 1 million people. That's what Saskatchewan is, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And when I got released, and I was released to Kamloops, and but all of the things, I constantly was saying to people, I am never going back to Saskatchewan. I am never going back to Saskatoon. Despite the fact that I have a bunch of family here and my oldest daughter was here, I was like, I will never go back there. Because, I had a lot of really bad things happen here, a lot of trauma associated with it. I still had my husband here, my ex-boyfriend here. I was like, it's not happening.
I've said literally, I have said I'm never going back to Saskatchewan 100 times. So I can totally appreciate what you're saying.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah. So I'm working for Kamloops Fry, and Chantal is like, you know what, you need to come back to Saskatchewan because Elizabeth Fry in Saskatchewan needs an executive director.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. And then she bugged me. Basically, she bugged me for about 2 months, and I had applied for the executive director position in Kamloops, and she talked me into applying for the executive director position here. And I basically surrendered. I handed it over to creator, and I was like, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And by the way, like, I had done my steps, a full set of steps, and I had made amends, to the best of my ability in respect to what opportunities to make amends, were rolled out to me. You know, there were some phone calls to family, there were letters to family, there were other opportunities to make amends through my step 8 and step 9, and but some of them weren't happening with me in Kamloops. You know, and so I thought maybe this is happening for a reason. Maybe Creator thinks it's time for me to come home. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply for both of these jobs, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So I did not get the Kamloops job. I ended up getting the Saskatoon job, or Saskatchewan job, and I came back to Saskatchewan.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
Basically what we do as an organization, we provide supports to women that have interactions with the justice system. And we have a lot of different programming. For example, we do a lot of court support. So we do basically from first charge, we do institutional inreach. So we go into the institutions and see where we can support people. We do bail support, we do court support, we do reintegration support. So when women are leaving a carceral setting, we do monitors conditions of confinement. So if there are, you know, human rights issues inside of the institutions, we go and work with you know, management and corrections to try to make sure that those things aren't happening again. We have an outpatient addictions program for women as well. It runs 4 days a week. And just recently, I managed to get housing for us as well.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Doing some good work there, right?
Yeah. So things have changed for the organization, I think, significantly since I came last year. I came in sort of roaring because Kamloops has a lot of services that Saskatchewan doesn't have. And so, you know, I see since I was here in 2015 and when I was incarcerated, things have gotten significantly worse. And I think that a lot of that has to do probably, so much worse. And it probably has a lot to do with the opioid crisis and fentanyl and the pandemic, but it also has a lot to do with the fact that we have a serious homelessness issue in community as well. And
which
so
I think a lot of that ties back to, of course, the addictions component, right? I mean, not all of it. That's, you can't blanket like that. But, you know.
I think that there's a lot of other intersectionality in community here as well around racism, though, and colonialism and intergenerational trauma and some of the things that Indigenous people face in community here. Not a lot of supports and not a lot of resources from government at this point. And, you know, I was talking about earlier that other organization that I work for that basically provides housing first. You know, there's not a lot of that going on, and there's just not any housing stock in community as well. And so there's all these different places where people are falling through the gaps. And, you know, basically we're seeing in Pine Grove, the women's provincial correctional, like last summer there's a capacity of 166 women in that institution, and last summer there was 275 women in that institution.
Dear.
Over 150 of them are on remand, so they haven't even been sentenced yet. So the issue is that poverty and racism and intergenerational trauma and addiction and all of those pieces are feeding survival-based, you know, behaviors that end up in people being criminalized. And so they end up in there because they have addiction or they don't have a house or whatever. And then they get kept in there because they aren't eligible for bail. You know, you don't have
because you don't have the home, and because you don't have all of those, of course. That makes sense.
So now I've kind of done this thing where I'm full circle. I spent time in that institution. I know what's going on in that institution. And I've been in community and I've been on both sides of it, but now I'm able to speak to those issues, and I'm getting into rooms with people that can make some changes. And I really feel like, despite the fact that I don't really want to be in Saskatchewan, I feel like I'm supposed to be here.
Sometimes that's all it is, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So that's, And I know from what I know of your story, right, and we haven't really talked about that, but to go from a crown prosecutor to addiction to jail to this crossing the border and being involved in the lifestyle. Oh my Lord, that's quite the story you got there. And now to be where you are, though, to be really helping people. And I know, I know that Chantel and I have talked about you quite a bit too. So like, I know a little bit more than what we've talked about here, and just in how much that you do help people. And I think that's absolutely amazing. Since you've been there, I'm really surprised to hear that things have gotten worse. We'll talk about that for a quick second, Nicole. Is that because
for sure.
Things have gotten worse because there's just so many more people in it? Not that, do you think the attitudes have gotten worse, or have the attitudes gotten better? Because I'm under the impression that attitudes have kind of gotten better, but is that a naive thing to say, right?
Yeah.
And overpopulation is going to make anything worse, always, right? I mean,
I think that Saskatchewan, and you might have recognized this when you lived here, there's a lot of polarization in community because people don't really understand why somebody might end up in active addiction, or they might not understand why someone might end up homeless, or there's not a lot of empathy around the fact that is the circumstance for some people. And despite the fact that people don't really want to admit this, there's a lot of racism in community here. And that Pine Grove is 95% Indigenous women. And it's not because Indigenous people are bad or Indigenous people commit more crimes. It's because we're dealing with a colonial system where people are still, very racist, including the police in a lot of situations, and including our court systems. And so that is just a circumstance, and it's all based on the systems that have existed for hundreds of years to so I feel like there is more awareness in respect to people that care about these things, like people that are in our orbit, people that are in recovery, people that are doing podcasts, or people that are promoting recovery or talking about recovery. Way more awareness, and there are people that are empathetic, but I think that there are just as many, if not more, people that find themselves struggling in respect to just financial issues, and so they're looking after their own situation, and they don't have a lot of empathy for people in community that are facing that
which
sort of
is
thing,
unfortunate,
right?
but understandable. Doesn't make it right. It just makes it understandable, right? That's,
right.
If that makes sense, right? And that is reality. I mean, the cost of living in Saskatchewan has jumped so much since I moved there in 2009. It's crazy how much it's gone up. Right? Of course, I went straight to Estevan where things were skyrocketing anyway, but the rest of the province was pretty manageable for a while there. And then, so things have gotten much more expensive just for the average Joe. So, like I said, it doesn't make it right. It makes it understandable, though, how somebody can get to that point.
And I think that, there are a lot of good programs and a lot of really great community-based organizations in town, but our government, which is a very conservative government that is looking at like forced treatment, is building more remand centers rather than more treatment programs. And the treatment programs that they are rolling out are outpatient. So they don't even begin to address people that can't attend outpatient addiction programming. So those sorts of policies from the government aren't making things any easier for the people that are suffering, and not making it any easier for community-based organizations that are basically having to fight for the same amount of funds that are out there, and kind of pitting us all against each other rather than allowing us to work together as organizations, because we're all fighting over this very small amount of money that the government is offering for programming that actually has, outcome based results, rather than these ideas that the government is coming up with that don't have outcome based results, like forced treatment, for example, or thinking that if you throw somebody in an institution that they're going to come out better, or thinking that you're going to put somebody in treatment and that will fix them, when we all know if you don't have sober living after you come out of treatment, that there's probably a really good chance that you're probably going to relapse again.
Yeah. Fair enough, right?
Yeah.
Fair enough. So
Yeah.
there's a lot going on there. Listen, we've gotten to the top of the hour already, so
Okay.
I'm glad we decided to do this instead of trying to pick up from last time, because
Right.
managed to kill an hour. So
for sure.
I want to thank you very much for coming on. We'll jump into my favorite part of the show, and that's the Daily Gratitudes. Today's Daily Gratitudes are brought to you by FAR Canada. That's Families for Addiction Recovery. They're an awesome program. They're absolutely free, and they help families kind of navigate those waters in just the most amazing way. They offer a group meeting once a week for people in similar situations. They have a phone line that's open a few hours a day for parents and loved ones that just really need to get some help now. And of course, their peer-to-peer support system is absolutely amazing. They can connect you with somebody who's in a very similar situation to yours, kind of been there, taken some training, and is able to help you kind of navigate those waters. So check them out, guys. That's farcanada.org. Now, here's Daily Gratitudes. What you got for some gratitudes today, Nicole?
Oh, geez. I'm grateful for my family.
Yeah.
And my relationship with my children. Last night I was out with my oldest and my youngest, and who both live here with me now, and their partners. So my family, absolutely. And my middle kid lives in BC, but that relationship is so important as well. Yeah. I'm grateful for my work. I love my work. It gives me purpose, and I've seen a lot of forward movement and my relationships with other people that care about the same things in community.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Myself today goes out to my mom. My mom gets a lot of daily gratitude from me, right? Again, the whole family thing, right? So it's a grind here, and she manages to just help. Even when she doesn't know I need it, it just comes, and it's like, oh my God, right? So I experienced that yesterday. It really, really saved my ass. I'm also very, very grateful to every single person who continues to like, watch, comment, share, pay attention, talk about all of the things. Every time you do these things, you're getting me a little bit closer to living my best life. My best life is to make a humble living, spreading the message. The message is this: if you're in active addiction right now, today could be the day. Today could be the day that you start a lifelong journey. Reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, call into detox, pray, go to a meeting, go to church. I don't care. Do whatever it is you got to do to get that journey started, because it is so much better than the alternative. And if you have a loved one who's suffering an addiction right now, you're just taking the time to listen to our conversation. You should take one more minute of your day and text that person. Let them know they are loved. Use the words, "You are loved." That little glimmer of hope just might be the thing that brings them back. Boom.